Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We are joined today by Ambassador Bhadrakumar, an Indian diplomat for 3 decades, and also a geopolitical analyst writing in the Counterpunch. So, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. It's my privilege. Thank you.
So, India, as we know, has always been the main and largest non-aligned state throughout the Cold War, and also it's continued on this tradition to avoid being pulled into any alliance systems or blocks, anything that will undermine its independent position. Um, so this is why it's kind of interesting, some of the things which have happened lately. That is, the US has, I guess, attempted to strong arm India, and well, some mistakes have been made, and this is obviously now being very counterproductive, as it's backfiring in a big way. And after all of this pressure and mishandling of the relationship with India, we now hear that Prime Minister Modi will go to Beijing to meet with Xi Jinping for the first time in 7 years, if I'm not mistaken. So this is becoming a case study in miscalculation, bullying, but also reorientation by India, possibly. So I thought, perhaps a good place to start is, what do you see having happened wrong in the relationship between the United States and India?
You're absolutely right, Professor, in delineating the salience of the situation. Miscalculations and imperatives for course correction, and all those things are very apt description of the state of play today. The uh, the fact of the matter is that India has not accepted the uh, the announcements, the stance taken by the United States to punish India. Because the point is, India is not convinced that it has been in the wrong in any way, and it is not. It is an infringement of Indian sovereignty if the United States acts to punish India, and so the reaction is very predictable. But equally predictable is that you mentioned about India's aversion towards a bloc mentality, which is a consistent trait all through its existence as an independent country. But apart from that, uh, the confrontationist mindset is actually alien to the Indian ethos, because the tendency is almost always to synthesize, and move on and find commonality. That is where it goes. So the future now beckons some interesting, very interesting, and very fateful course corrections on India's part, because I feel that there has been an awareness on the part of the policy makers that mistakes had been made. Uh, None other than the foreign minister admitted publicly that one thing we have learned is the fallacy of depending heavily on one particular country in our foreign relations, which is a candid admission of a certain failure. And coming from the foreign minister's level, it must be taken very seriously, because he is the one who's working on it. And there are enough signs to show that this visit of Prime Minister Modi to China for the summit meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is going to be seized by India. And it is possible to see it from such a perspective also, because China is a very important participant, very important player in what is unfolding here. And I am not trying to say that the what India is initiating is a direct result of the kind of standoff with developed with the United States. Actually, again, the foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar, mentioned that if a point were to be fixed where the overture to China and the shift in the China policy, the changes that were in the offing were surfacing for the first time. That was in October when Mr. Modi met with President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the BRICS in Kazan. And even before that, those of us who live here and are closely observant of the churnings in the foreign policy front could see that a perceptible change of attitude towards China was shaping up. And that, frankly speaking, one of the main reasons was, in fact, the powerful influence, the influence of the business community as an influencer in this process. Convinced that India can only benefit out of opening up with China. Now, this was much before Trump's arrival as president, much before his doctrine of the tariff, weaponization of tariff, and much before his assault on India. So there is a certain continuity there. We must also bear that in mind.
Well, there appears to be a lot of things which is, I guess, annoying India at the moment. If I'm not mistaken, the U.S. or Trump taking credit for brokering this ceasefire between India and Pakistan does not appear to have gone down well. We see that these secondary sanctions on India for trading with Russia also, great concern that this could establish a precedent if India would bow to pressure. We see various threats, but also today I think is the first day when the 50% tariffs are imposed or starting, and rather than backing down and reconsidering the alienation of India, it appears that the United States is doubling down, saying how unfair it is that India still trades with Russia. But how is this impacting considerations within India, though? Because there's a strong pro-American, group or sentiments, voices within India. How is this being received within India? This, I guess, as you mentioned, perhaps not perhaps, what seems to be a very undeserved treatment, given that you mentioned that India doesn't see that it has done anything wrong.
You see, there are two dimensions to it. One is elitist opinion. That is sections of the elitist opinion. I don't think that the entire elitist opinion in India is pro-American. Far from it. The nationalist lobby is very robust in India, and they are supportive of it, supportive of the government's stance and the government's way of handling it. And then, there is like a democratically elected government. The primary consideration will be how it plays in the public domain in the country. And there, you see, the Prime Minister has spoken very forcefully in terms of what one can call a doctrine of economic nationalism. That is, India looks at this as an infringement on its sovereignty, and that is completely unacceptable. So it is a benchmark that the government has set, and I can't see how it can budge from it easily, because it will be vulnerable to a lot of criticism in the country that it buckled under American pressure. And for a government which is pivoting on nationalist sentiments, it will be very difficult. You can see it in the newspapers and television programs and all that, how the ordinary people are viewing it, So that lobby, the pro-American lobby, whose existence is not to be denied at all, they have taken a kind of a subservient role. They also have been, sections of them have also been forced to articulate sentiments critical of the United States. So it's a curious situation there, because, this is a country which is very deeply, of people who are very deeply patriotic and nationalistic, because there's a whole history of India's freedom struggle. It's past as a British colony, and it's a struggle for independence and all that. These are not things, which have faded away. They are very much there, and they are going to be at work. So I don't think the pro-American lobby can do much about it, and it is quite evident already. We can discuss this a little bit later, perhaps. But it's quite apparent already that Foreign Minister Mr. Jaishankar, who visited Moscow and was received by President Putin, which is an extraordinary departure from the protocol practices of the Kremlin, um, spoke up very strongly about what the United States has done. And he has almost directly taken a swipe at President Trump himself. This is unprecedented. And so you can see that whatever is the sections, whatever it is that the sections of the elitist opinion would have liked that India should soft pedal this issue. Uh, that doesn't seem to be happening, because Jaishankar's visit to Moscow brought up certain templates which are indicative of new thinking, radically new thinking in India's foreign policy involving Russia.
How significant do you think the meeting now, or Modi going to China, is, not just for the bilateral relations, but also how is it being received within India? Because have always been some tensions between, not always, at least since the 1960s, been some tensions between China and India. Um, is there concerns uh, about this meeting, or how do they see this? Is this seen as a possible support for further engagement in BRICS, or I guess, what are the larger ramifications here?
Well, I think to answer your to respond to your last point about BRICS, I think that is going to be inevitable. Because I mentioned about that is more so evident from what Mr. Jaishankar said in Moscow while addressing the press in along with Mr. Lavrov, and also his return to Delhi, where he touched on this again. So the important point that Jaishankar mentioned is by implication a much stronger commitment that India was daring to take in the upright situation before all this broke out, this stiff broke out, uh, about the use of uh, local currencies, which is, as you know, the crux of the matter in the BRICS process. And therefore, what we are seeing is that Dashankar has told the media in the presence of Mr. Lavrov that uh, the two countries must expedite a, a free trade agreement between the the Eurasian Economic Union and India. Now, frankly, this is an area where India was reluctant to push, because of a fear, naturally, of fear that it will be misperceived by the Americans as a hostile policy towards Washington. And in fact, India was allegedly acting as a kind of a braking mechanism even within BRICS on this aspect of it. Now, what does it imply? If there is a free trade agreement shaping up there, then the two countries are going to trade in goods and services, including financial services, uh, outside the orbit of the American dollar. And the wherewithal for the Americans even to monitor what is going on in the India Russia trade will shrink dramatically. And this has happened already in the case of Russia and China, where, of course, the trade volume is massive, $245 billion. But India and Russia are also talking about nearing $100 billion in a conceivable future, near future. So if that would happen, you can see already that within BRICS, you have something like about $350 billion trade taking place uh, in local currencies. Now, I personally think that this is going to be a very dramatic shift. And the fact that the call came from Jaishankar instead of from the Russian side, and the Russian side always took a stance of showing understanding to the Indian compulsions and never really pushed the envelope. But this time, the overture and the insistence was from the Indian side. You know, so you can imagine that what this entails, because a free trade zone, if it develops between the Eurasian Economic Union and India, then the way of handling trade between the two sides, considering the realities of Western sanctions against Russia, will be in the local currencies, as you can see. And this creates a synergy for BRICS to proceed on lines where India was thought to be a stumbling block previously. So this is, I think, this is what is taking place is of momentous importance, and it will be rubbing on the BRICS dynamics itself, in a very significant way. Then the second thing, the Jaishankar mentioned was about a direct criticism of President Trump in this matter. Now, this is itself something really extraordinary. The newspapers had noted it that this he took on President Trump, directly and indirectly, but very implicitly, but very very thinly veiled way, and it was quite clear that that India was India is digging in, you know. So taken together, you have a sea change in the situation. The calculus is changing, and India it is uh, thinking of the situation in terms of a profound reset of its external relations, and the old hesitations and reticence about identifying with the BRICS process beyond a point, they are not going to be there the way that they were there previously.
In one of your articles, you point out that Foreign Minister Jaishankar, he argued that India and China has to jointly maintain the stability of the world economy. This, from the Indian perspective, is this considered to be then very new and different language? Because this doesn't sound like the common suspicion, as you said. It appears to be a larger shift, and also how does India's position fit within what is happening in the wider region? Because one also see that other partners of United States, be it South Korea, Japan, a lot of them seem to be reconsidering a bit the partnership with the United States. Not to go against the United States, but simply to diversify, avoid excessive dependence, and more or less organizing around the new idea of adjusting to a Asian century, or well, learning to live with his neighbors, which is peacefully, which can be difficult if the foreign policy is outsourced to the United States, or if one gets engaged or embroiled into this bloc politics structures.
You see, in this respect, we must take into consideration the backlog of history. That a very dramatic acceleration of the normalization with China is not to be expected. And also, secondly, probably more importantly, it is not going to be in India's hands to accelerate that way. It also depends on China's response. So far, my reading is China's response has been good. And that came particularly at the level of the ambassador in Delhi. And he spoke about American bullying, and he spoke about China's support for India, you know. these are not sentiments which have been articulated um, conceivably in the recent past, in the past several years. So there are indications, and probably I would expect that with the Modi's visit to China in the offing and a meeting with President Xi Jinping, all but certain bilaterally, uh, I think more Chinese statements might come in this. The What I have seen is that the Americans are indulging in a kind of a psy war there. They are the spokesmen, the establishment spokesmen are giving a spin that China is not encouraging India. Encouraging means quote unquote. It's not encouraging India, and is primarily obsessed, prioritizing China's own problems with the United States, and they may not be averse to capitalizing on the situation between India and the United States to encash some benefits out of it. I think this is a completely bogus argument because uh, it completely rejects uh, the reality that China is a country where the foreign policy is based on clear principles, and those principles cannot be wished away. And what China is facing, it must be open to Chinese understanding that what it is facing is a version of what India is facing. It's almost quintessentially it is the same. And this common interest, in fact, was probably Truman, and the ambassador in Delhi would not have spoken as a solo effort by himself on such a sensitive issue. So there may be more to come, and it is only natural that in the sidelines of in the run up to an important summit meeting like this, neither side is going to play its cards. Neither side is going to speak up with just a clutch of days ahead for this event to take place. It will take the shine off the event itself. So my hope and my hope is that there will be a much more pronounced Chinese expression of support for India, and that will definitely give a momentum. And one is visit to India recently, just last week. Visit to India was a clear indication that China is looking forward to moving in a direction with India for a comprehensive relationship, and Jaishankar was responsive to the idea. And Shinhua News Agency said that this was a common sentiment of the two foreign ministers. These are very big statements to be made, although in implicitly, there. So we'll have to wait and see. But I personally feel that we can expect something uh, of a major character in the Chinese position on this issue during or after the visit of Prime Minister Modi to China.
Well, it seems historic for this reason. Again, back in 1999, when NATO expanded and 12 days later attacked Yugoslavia, this is kind of when the Russian dream of having a European future began to die. And I remember that time you had Primakov, who began to then articulate the need for a multipolar world because, well, in the unipolar world, there was simply no room for a Russia. So the main idea of Primakov then would be you needed a partnership between Russia, India, and China. However, in the late 90s, what they would then find was that neither China nor India had the capabilities or the willingness to form such a partnership simply because of the distribution of power. All the economic power was concentrated in the United States. But forward now, 25 years, the world looks very different. It's China, of course, is immensely powerful. India as well is coming up, and the Russians also are in a stronger position. So it does appear that this is a possibility, this trilateral format of these three Eurasian giants. But again, the main weakness, though, appears to be the tensions between China and India. But at the heart of this, is it the power gap between China and India, or is it mostly the territorial issues? And I guess to pack in another question, if so, what possibilities are there to make actual progress there on the territorial disputes?
See, Professor, to my mind, India missed the bus in the 1990s. And Trimako's suggestion was a very gentle prodding to India to think afresh, because it also coincided that with a radical shift in the Soviet Chinese uh, rapprochement, which began actually in the Soviet era before the war ended and before 1991, and which Russia was well aware of, and China was already responding to Gorbachev's Soviet Union. This is what the chronicle of Soviet Chinese relationship shows. And now, my assessment is that the Sino-Soviet schism and the border dispute between the two great powers was much more complex than India's border dispute. Because India's border dispute is actually quintessentially writing on a fresh page, which is blank, and there must be a readiness to sketch there one's viewpoints with foresight and wisdom. Now, that was the challenge there. And the Indian narrative didn't quite allow that. But in the case of China, it is not that alone. In the case of China and the Soviet Union, China and Russia, it was also a very difficult history. And that sort of a difficult history was never there, because 1962 war itself was more of an aberration, in centuries of interaction between the two neighboring powers. Clearly, history shows that. So in a way, it should have been easy. But then what happened at that time was, that India was in very serious economic distress. It had to pawn its gold reserves in London and take money from the IMF. And the Soviet Union's collapse had a deleterious effect on the Indian morale at that time. And it was not possible, perhaps, to be fair to the regime at that time in Delhi, to have taken an attitude other than, putting it on cold storage for the time being for a later day to address. But in any case, the opportunity was lost. And now, with hindsight, as you correctly mentioned, the Russian-Chinese relationship has flourished, and it is virtually on the brink of an veritable alliance. Without the either side calling it that way. That is what it is coming to, approaching. And the second point is this: that the China's rise took a very dramatic turn by the 1990s. At that time, it was possible for India probably to consider a kind of talk with China as equals, with mutual respect, with fairness, and so on, because the two economies didn't have that sort of a gap. But then, with each day, each week, each month, each year, China was pulling away from India in terms of its growth and development. So now you're dealing with a situation where China is what some say 6 times, some say 8 times the size of the Indian economy. So the balance has been lost there. Therefore, now this earlier thing that in wisdom you could write fresh things, clear things on a blank page. That is not the case here, because there is an imbalance in the relationship itself. So it is, in a way, it has become more complicated. Then There are other aspects to it. The way the trajectory of India-United States relationship developed, and the whisperings of the Americans, their think tankers and their policy makers to the Indian ear, that India has a bright future as a counterweight to China. An idea which gained ground because it was a very heady thought for India, for the elites in India. So all those things complicated it, and we put the considerations over normalizing in China on the back burner. And the present period, if you come to, I think the last few years, the most recent years, would have been particularly concerning for China. The way the Indian elite, the government, and the Indian policies drew close to the American agenda, and they were all along open to India having, open to accepting India having a relationship with a very important power like the United States. But the fact is, we know that the opposition to Belt and Road, there are many things which are there on the plate now, and those things, even things like let me not get into negative things. When there is a important visit taking place in the coming future in the next 2 to 3 days, but a perception grew that India was, taking its horses to the American stable. Now, this is something extremely worrisome for China. So, from that point of view, this happening now suddenly here, unlike what the American propagandists are saying that China is indifferent to it and China is inclined to take advantage of it and exploit it, my reading of the situation is that that is not how China is going to think. China would look at it as a great opportunity for a reset in the relationship with India. This is how I feel it. Maybe it is partly because I have consistently advocated a normalization with China as something which should be very advantageous for India's growth and development, and we should work on it much more diligently, and if necessary, by even keeping a distance from the Americans in certain respects, particularly relating to the regional security issues concerning China. But that didn't happen. But now all those things are in the realms of possibility. I don't mean to say that India is going to uh, quit Quad, but Quad is going to be toothless for all purposes in the foreseeable future. And the South Korean foreign minister was in Delhi. Other countries are also obviously exchanging notes with India. And this visit by Prime Minister to China is preceded by a visit by Mr. Modi to Japan, obviously for consultations on the Quad and such issues. And India has not announced anything with regard to a Quad summit. Certainly, conditions are not conducive for that at the moment. But that being the state of play, I don't think it is possible. It is likely that Trump will attend a Quad meeting at all, which was originally thought of for the month of September when he's coming to Asia. I think for the APEC summit, he's coming to Asia. Papers are reported that way. So these are the things, the churnings that are there in the air, and we'll wait and see.
When Russia looks towards Eurasia, though, they tend to look towards China as being the main driving force, given that it has, again, both the ability and the preparedness to construct a more an alternative Eurasian economic architecture, that is one that doesn't depend excessively on American technologies and industries and currency, banks, transportation corridors. But at the same time, because because China is so powerful, they also want to diversify their ties in the region so they don't end up with excessive dependence only on China, given this asymmetry would be put them in a vulnerable position in terms of preserving their economic autonomy. But I was wondering, as an Indian diplomat, how do you see or interpret India's wider approach to Eurasia, because of course solving the puzzle between India and China is very important, but it has a much wider ramification. It enables pursuit of other interests and initiatives across Eurasia as well.
Well, already there are stirrings in the air that one could see. Because the prioritization of the relationship with Russia is something very striking at the moment. And now this opens the door also. We are not looking at it because the Russia's response to this is going to be much more forthcoming than China's response. We are only talking about the oil flow from Russia. But Russia is, a treasure house of resources, minerals, and others, where, India has a much, much bigger possibility to integrate, and I think that's going to happen. The both in terms of Indian investment and in terms of Russian investment. And if a payment system can be worked out, I think there could be massive jump in the bilateral trade. So the Russian attitude is going to be very significant. And I get a feeling that, if you look back at the recent years, the kind of attention that Russia is paying to India is absolutely striking. This kind of an attention was never paid to India after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, it obviously shows that at the highest level of leadership, there is an intense awareness that this country, which is the fastest growing major economy in the world, is a potential partner that that Russia must pair with. That is quite clear there. And look at it. It's an agricultural country, and suppose, for instance, there is investments taking place in the sphere of fertilizers from Russia. Enormous scope for it. There is there. Then, secondly, the trade links, are forged through the international transportation corridor via Iran. These are all I am talking about things where India was actually soft pedaling in the recent period. But now India has an imperative need to press speedy implementation of these projects. And Russia would be, I would imagine, Russia would be very, very receptive to it, because India is a very comfortable partner for Russia. There are no major conflicts of interest, and the Russians know how to operate in the Indian milieu, and how to navigate their projects, how to negotiate with Indians, and and more than anything else, an attitude of give and take always characterized the Russian mindset when it came to India. They were never, stubborn in insisting that theirs is the solemn truth. They were always willing to, adjust India's concerns and so on. So it's a very comfortable relationship. And if Russia proceeds on these lines, as Putin himself was, Putin is not really missing any opportunity to stress the high importance that his government attaches to relations with India. You know, and it is completely even out of context. He harps on this subject, and in this Russian system, the message goes down, and you know, Mr. Montunov is the person who's the co-chairman along with the Indian Foreign Minister, Deputy Prime Minister Montunov. He's a co-chairman of the Joint Commission with India. And anybody who knows Russia um, closely would know the importance of being Monsunov, in the Russian political system. He's a rising star in the Russian firmament, in the Kremlin politics. So, what does it show? It again shows that very high attention is possible to be paid to in matters concerning relations with India. You know, so the Russian attitude is very, very important in my opinion, and that attitude is not leaving anything to be desired. I think Russia will draw encouragement. It press the accelerator for some of those projects where it was hesitant because of a sense that India was lukewarm in the past. That is one thing. Then, the Chinese investments in India, that will also go parallel with the Russian, with the development of the Russia ties, India's. I think China will also draw comfort if the relationship with India flourishes in such a way, and the bilateral trade is almost shoulder to shoulder. Russia's bilateral trade with India and China's bilateral trade with India almost on par, going like that. I think India has a very favorable situation there also, and these are all possibilities which are clearly there. And my fear is, let me introduce that thought here. My fear is that in a near future, there may be a rethink in America because I get a strong feeling that they have sensed that Trump goofed up. The kind of writings which are there and the rhetoric there goofed up. But Trump is a very proud man, and I don't think that he will be resigning from this position very easily. So, in what form and what will be the time frame in which that is going to happen? And I only wish that that India will not go back to the previous history of being a quasi ally of the United States. I don't think that will happen. But this is a worrying thought also, which I must articulate. Today, in fact, I heard a podcast by George Friedman. I think you would know him, and he expounded a thesis, in fact, basically on this that Americans are not very serious about, putting India down on the mat. And it's not a relationship that United States attaches such high importance, but it's a kind of a game plan to show that they could rubbish the relations with India, and for instance, a salutary effect on the United States' relations with China. I think it is a far-fetched thesis, but nonetheless, the important thing is that that influential sections of the American strategic community are still voicing such opinions. And within the Congress also, there is a body of opinion which is restless about what is unfolding in US Indian relations. So that is also something which we need to factor in. We cannot be oblivious of it.
But this must really go down in history as one of the massive blunders on the American side, that the efforts to strong arm India into breaking economic ties with Russia is leading to India leading itself also closer with China. I mean, some of this should have been predictable, but I'm not sure how they ended up in this situation. There's, again, a massive miscalculation. So, do you have any final words before we wrap up?
No, I can I can put it all together in this way that the uh, change in the calculus is going to work well for India's relations with Russia and China, because there is a kind of an awakening about the lopsided foreign policy trajectory that India pursued in terms of prioritizing the relations with the United States. Not only did it bring so much dividends, and India would have hoped, it has had a bad influence on it led to actually a neglect of other priority areas. Therefore, a diversified relationship is something which I think will continue. That is my feeling. And then, there is a complete breakdown of trust with the Trump administration. And it cannot be shoved under the carpet. That one day you cannot say that everything is back to normal with the United States. It has been a rude awakening for India. And that will be also a game changer for India, because India is a country with great national pride. And the fact is that its image has been tarnished and it has been rubbished by the Trump administration without any kind of consideration for its sense of self-respect and sense of self-esteem. And therefore, it will be very difficult to pick up the threats just like that. That is my feeling. Now, 31st is likely the day that is just about 2 days, 3 days to go for the meeting between Modi and Xi Jinping. And my feeling is that it will be a path-breaking visit by Modi, and there will be some major thought processes triggered by that event. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And I'll be watching very closely as Prime Minister Modi arrives in Beijing. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor.